Hi, Alli. Welcome to the Rupture Next podcast.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me.
So, for listeners, Alli has been a long time guest. We met when we were both podcasting early days before the pandemic, the 2018s, living in New York,
Yep.
having early podcasts that were trying to train people. What is a podcast? What is it all about? How do you actually,
What's the point?
what,
Why does it even matter?
yeah, where can I listen to a podcast? What
Right.
is happening?
Yeah.
So I
hmm
love chatting with you because you've come to the show a couple of times, but I've been following your career, your writing career because it's parallel to what's happening to the podcast I know, but you're actually debuting your first release, your first publication. Maybe you have another baby, but yeah.
Yes, I have a human baby. Yes, it is so funny though, because you were on my podcast very early. And I remember when you agreed to be on the show, you were one of my first people that I was like, oh my gosh, she has a following. She knows what she's doing. Like you were a get for me early. And that was really cool. And then I think that I forget what we talked about on your show.
I think
I've been on once or twice.
yeah, literary fiction. You were actually character driven
Yes.
roles, and we realized I was pleasure driven
Okay.
roles. We were opposites. So our reading tastes were opposites.
Interesting.
It has
Okay.
changed. And now I actually do follow character driven novels and lit fiction. And then
Welcome.
I think you came back. I don't remember why you came back around pandemic time, but it's been a long time. We've been in this for almost 10 years at this point.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, glad to be back, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So we got to talk about your writing journey because I witnessed it. You have been sharing about it. You moved out of New York, you moved to Philly, you went to an MFA program. You also have been freelance writing for a long time. So it's not writing novels, is not the only thing you're doing. But talk to us about the process because I know this was not the first book that you decided to put out submission. There was actually another book. What led you to start writing Too Blessed to Stress?
Yes, so I started writing Too Blessed to Stress the summer between the first and second years of my MFA program, and it became my thesis for MFA. So it wasn't entirely finished, but the vast majority of the first draft of Too Blessed to Stress ended up being my thesis. I had written a book in the first year of my MFA program that I didn't query and never went out on submission, but I did finish a book. And I was like, I did it. It's done. And we had one professor in the MFA program who had this saying where he said, if you can break the back of one book in your MFA program, then that's a great thing. I thought that I had done it. And I do think having finished a book, good or bad, like knowing that you can do it is super important. But then I went back and I started editing it because I really thought that this first book was going to be the thing. I was like, I'm going to edit this, I'm going to perfect it. I'll go out and try to get an agent. And then when I was reading it, I was like, this is not only bad, but I don't really care that much to make it better because all first drafts are kind of by definition like not great. That's kind of the
Yeah.
point. But I wasn't interested enough in the subject material to like really buckle down and do the editing. And so I started to think about what I really wanted to immerse myself in and what would be fun and what I could dig into in a different way. And because it was pandemic times and we'd all been spending so much time at home on our screens, I had fallen down this, to me, weird rabbit hole of Christian influencers. At some point while we were on lockdown, I was served a video of, quite frankly, like a beautiful young woman talking about her purity and saving herself for marriage, which is people make all kinds of choices and people are entitled to their choices. But this was a way of talking about that choice that I was relatively unfamiliar with. And I thought that it was interesting, kind of just from like a sociological perspective. And of course, the algorithmed and kept giving me not only Instagram videos, but like my YouTube changed, my Spotify podcast recommendations changed. I started getting weird things on Facebook. Like all of a sudden, the internet was kind of laying all of this content out for me on a silver platter. And I thought that it was really interesting. It wasn't necessarily coming from a place of judgment for me, even though those views are so different from my own. It was a fascination and it was almost about figuring out, okay, there's a lot here content wise that I don't agree with, but where are the places that I kind of feel connected with these women? Why am I so drawn in to this content? And where can I like kind of confer that importance and that point of connection with them? Because if I'm getting drawn in as somebody who is like not religious at all, and who quite frankly has political views that directly conflict with what a lot of these women are talking about, then a lot of people will probably be drawn in. So I wanted to figure that out. And yeah, I spent the whole second year of my MFA program focusing on the first draft and queried the book to agents the following summer. And it's just kind of gone on from there.
Yeah. So talk to the two blessed, two stressed. What is the elevator pitch?
Yeah, so the elevator pitch, conveniently now, thanks to Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which
Yes.
has blown up in the time since I wrote the book. The elevator pitch is that the book is for fans of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and books like Emma Rosenblum's Bad Summer People. It is a book about four young women who are members of a megachurch community in Charlotte, North Carolina, but who also form kind of the the guiding foundation, the guiding team of a social media collective called the Moral Mavens. And as the unofficial heads of the Moral Mavens, they are amassing thousands and thousands of followers, bringing attention not only to their beliefs, but to their church and to this young charismatic pastor named Kyle Welsh, who is developing a platform of his own, sort of in parallel with the Mavens. And the book covers each of the women's individual stories. So we learn about what has brought them to Moving Word, which is their church. They all have very different backgrounds, very different kind of orientations to their faith. And we also follow the journey of the congregation as a whole as they approach this big event, which is to benefit a human trafficking organization. So, yeah, it's about kind of how we portray ourselves online, what we keep private, what we share publicly, how friendship is sometimes murky online, how we develop community in the public eye. And it's also about powerful institutions, powerful men in big institutions, and how as we like slot ourselves into these communities, we often have to make hard choices. It is it's a little juicy, it's not salacious. And I really wanted the women to feel extremely nuanced and interesting and relatable to readers, even if they don't come from a community like this. I wanted it to create conversation about what's happening online and what's happening politically. And quite frankly, I think the book is more relevant now than I ever imagined that it could be when I wrote it.
Yeah, it is so relevant to the conversation that we're having now. We saw the rise of MomTok, TikTok, influencers, and we had influencers before 2020. But there's now a rise to a sense of like monetization of like creating, spreading the gospel, spreading the message, and
Hmm.
everyone trying to amass because they found money coming in or financial support. They're trying
Yep.
to become, a lot of the women are supporting their family. So they're
Yeah.
contributing, even though they're having multiple babies or they're having their child rearing, they're doing all these different things. I think in some ways it content creation, because I went to deep dive on MLMs. MLM
Yeah.
haunts, they're still my go-to. They're what I hone in because
Yeah.
it's,
My second book is about MLMs, so
yeah.
you'll like that.
So I see like a lot of women who go into an MLM and they do all this Instagram lives, they do all this different things. They're trying to sell something because they want to make some money for the household. They want to contribute to the household, or they want to retire their husband, or they want to.
Hmm.
There's all these elements of, we have this girl boss era that we RIP that happened that they're still evolving, and then it has, the right wing has done a great job about putting money on influencers and
Yep.
spreading the message. They're the ones who are paying the dark money to have people come and share traditional values and traditional family. And so it's pretty consistent, especially when you think about what they're trying to do, human trafficking. Like we had the QAnon in the 2020s, and I want to know
Yeah.
where they are now. But we have the Mahas and we had the
Yeah.
wellness who are raw milk, and but they don't think about the discrepancy between what is happening, what are social needs are happening, they're missing, and then what they're actually advocating for. Like they're advocating for human trafficking, but not at home.
Yeah, and I think all of that is so true. And in recent days, like we don't, of course, have to get into the politics of it, but I guess I just would encourage listeners to think about how all of the headlines that are happening right now, like all of the big crazy things that are getting us riled up, like most of those things can be traced back to a social media conversation
Yeah.
and to a small group of people maybe like chatting about something, and then it grows and then it grows and then it grows. And so I think whether those conversations are rooted in certain religious traditions, whether they're rooted in conspiracy theories, whether they're rooted in like financial concerns, whatever it is, there's so much power in the way we use the internet. And we know this, but I almost think we take it for granted now because it just is baked into everything that we do.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of influencer books coming out. There's a lot of influencer content. And I wanted to, in my book, make sure that I was creating opportunities for it to be like a little bit of a bigger conversation. And so I do think having the religious element of it, it forces that conversation a bit because it's about how, like, how can we honor people's faith traditions and respect what people believe while also recognizing that sometimes those beliefs are A, commodified in a way that feels icky, and B, sometimes, often fly in the face of other people's freedoms to exist and love and be who they are. I hope that is like the unique contribution of Too Blessed to Stress. It's all wrapped up in what I think is like a really voicey and fresh package. But I really also think that like book clubs in particular will have a lot to talk about with this book because you could read it multiple times and probably see something different happening on the page depending on what's going on in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting time because I don't think it planned that there was going to be Mormon wives coming out in March or
No,
Paul is going to be a bachelorette, and
no, I
and so
didn't. Yeah.
so it's like
Actually, when I
perfect.
wrote the book, Laura, people were, when I was like querying, and even early on in the process of being out on submission, my agent was like, this might be a tough sell because of the religion piece. People don't want
Yeah,
to touch religion. And so I actually think that writing about religion, even though the consensus is that there's no punching down in the book, like
yeah,
the goal of the book is to show it in a very balanced way and just kind of put it on the page and let people decide. But if anything, I actually think like going there with the religious aspect sort of slowed things down a little bit. But in some ways, that worked out well because it was like now the world is ready for it. And now I think if I had gone out with it now, people would be like, oh, of course we're writing about religion
yeah,
and influencers and like reality TV stars, like you said, like the Taylor Frankie Paul of it all. But by the time that book came out, 2 or 3 years, like who knows how much it
yeah,
would be part of the conversation. So I guess timing is everything. And I also think like the Mormon piece of things has become so it's so everybody's talking about like the Mormon wives and
yeah.
the Mormon mom talk, and that's great. But there is, as I have found, like this whole other side of the internet that is kind of like a non denominational, evangelical, Christian piece of things that, based on what I've seen, is actually even more kind of open about their theology and their beliefs than a lot of the Mormon influencers are.
Yeah, because I think Mormon influencers, we've had them since the 2010s. They're the early mommy
Yeah.
bloggers. They're the
Yep.
early OG Mormon. The Mormon Church fostered that and said you should definitely talk
Hmm.
about it. This is your
Yeah.
mission and a specific thing. I think maybe other churches saw this as, oh, this is another opportunity, like a PR opportunity. Like it's no, Alcoholic Anonymous is like it's promotion. No, you don't do promotion, attraction as opposed to promotion. Like you're not supposed
Yes.
to talk. You're
Yes.
supposed to. So there probably is the same idea. We're gonna
Hmm.
attract you. We're gonna use the experience of I'm doing so well. I have all these kids, or I have all this like very loving family, and everyone
Yeah.
cares about it, and that attracts more congruence and more congruence, more money because it's a business at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I've been thinking a lot about this as I prepare to go on book tour because I recognize that it's sensitive for somebody who
Yes.
doesn't come from this culture to show up and be like, I wrote a book about a megachurch. And so I've been very mindful in reflecting like how I came to this material. And I do think it's because I happened to meet people along the way in my life who were just like lovely, wonderful people. And I didn't know that they happened to be part of these like non denominational churches. And they weren't trying to evangelize me or convert me,
Yeah.
but I was very charmed by them. We became great friends. And it was only later on that I realized that they had this whole other part of their life. And again, there was nothing insidious going on, but I think I realized, oh, interesting. There is this kind of magic that happens in communities where people are encouraged to let their light shine. Like
Yeah.
your light shines, it works. And in the height of COVID, when we were all stuck in our homes and I hadn't made any new friends in my new city, and I was like looking for content other than golden retrievers, like ice skating or whatever, these really beautiful, like enthusiastic, hey girl style young women were like making me feel safe. And it was appealing to me in the same way that some of these people I'd met in real life were. And it works. And I also think it's authentic. I think I don't say any of this from a place of people are lying. I think the women in my book as well, I come from a place of, for the most part, people truly believe things they say they believe. And they're coming at it from a place of genuinely wanting to make the world a better place. That's how I like to see the world. And so when I approached my characters from perspective, it was a little bit easier for me to connect with them. And that's how I felt about the real influencers that I modeled my characters after. Like, I thought that they were kind of in it for the right reasons in bachelor speak. I didn't agree, but I was like, go you. Like, you're out there doing it, you're sharing what you believe. Please don't be offensive. Please don't be bigoted. Once you are, I'm done. But it's an interesting balance to strike. I learned a lot while researching for the book.
Yeah, someone who has been on the periphery observing it and not having
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. And knowing you, I was like, wait, how does she know? Like, we're thinking through reading, I was like, Alli, like, is Alli part of denominational church or like what, like
Mm,
how involved it is? And at the same time, like, oh no, I think it shows like a low respect for the characters and a low respect for looking at the nuance of like their lives. Like, it's not just black or white. It's not as easy to just say, we're just going to say no or
mm,
oppose everything on principle. Is to actually look at their experience and see how did it come about to the church? What is this church filling for them? What is this
right.
friend group allowing them to have? Because we're experiencing in the post-pandemic world, we're experiencing like not a lot of community, not a lot
Mm-hmm.
of sense of fostering a place where you can be yourself, that people actually will have friends coming over and specific things. And so having a friend group, it's a unique thing and it's something that, especially as a young woman, is you take it for granted. I think we took it for granted in the odds where you thought it was Sex and the City and girls, like our
Yep.
media was like, oh, we're just gonna have a friend
Yeah.
group and it's
Of
toxic
course.
and it's just there. But in the
We're
we're
messy.
not,
Yeah.
but in the post-pandemic, it's all online. We're just
Mm-hmm.
being sharing. It's normal for us to share each other reels and not talk to each other. Have friends that I
Mm-hmm.
can just send them like, here's the latest reach bait, and here is the latest thing, or here's the
Yeah.
puppy video. As opposed to be like, actually, let's just go out for dinner. Like
Yeah.
lives are so fragmented. And then especially mothers who have kids who have a different in the schedule that's actually more more tight, more like there's more stuff going on. And
Yeah.
so it's hard. And so having this place to see, hey, these churches are places where you get community. You go for
Yeah.
1 hour, you go for after hours, you have the social aspect of it. You make
Yeah. There's a real value proposition for everybody.
Yeah, like I had a similar experience when I was in recovery for a while. I actually deconstructed a lot of what I learned in 12 steps. But a lot of the
Mm,
12 steps, what it does is it's a community aspect. You learn to share your experience, strength, and help. You learn the specific language that you use. You learn not to have advice. You learn not to have crosstalk, how they say it. Like, you should be doing this. Like, you learn to
right.
honor that space. And a lot of times when I was early recovery, I was actually just going through meetings because I needed something to do to get out.
Mm,
And so that was the
yeah.
place. Like it was like you go to a random church, you go talk to people, talk to strangers, and those strangers become your friends. And then you have someone to talk to. It's normal to share phone numbers and then have this idea. And along the way is like attraction rather than promotion. You want to attract, you don't want to say who's there, who's that. And I still have friends from that experience. I still people
Mm,
I'm close to because we all came from that place, like that place of despair. And so a lot of churches provide that space, that spiritual
yes.
place that we're meaning that we don't have because capitalism doesn't allow us to have meaning.
Yeah.
And upon us the community aspect of it. So it's easy to look down and say, oh, they voted for so and so this, and they're horrible. But look at the nuance of where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels there to what you're describing. And I think it's important to have the full conversation about people's intentions. And there's, of course, the intention versus impact conversation, which we all got to know very well in 2020 and 2021. And I think that's another discussion that can probably come out of the book. But yeah, I mean, community is important for everybody. And some of us are born into certain communities, some of us find our way into certain communities, and we are fed or by those communities in different ways.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to the MLM book. As someone who is obsessed with MLMs, and I
Yes.
watch every YouTube, and I have my favorite MLMs. I
Uh,
got like shampoo, I got the crypto, I got the water machine, all kinds. So I'm excited, but I'm really excited for the books that you're writing. There are more book club books that are enjoy conversation and are timely to today's conversation. So I love your writing. I love the fact that it felt very nuanced, but it felt very like juicy. Like it felt
mhm.
like a place where I was like, I'm just like hanging out with friends and I'm just like observing. It's essentially watching your algorithm in more.
Good. I mean, that's what I hope it feels like. And I'm looking forward when the book comes out because, of course, we're talking now about
Yeah.
3 weeks away from when the book comes out. I'm so excited for more people to have the book in their hands so we can talk about these people
Yeah.
and talk about how we feel about all of this having read the book because for so long I've had this like little obsession. I nursed this like private fascination with this community. And while more people I think are exposed to it, thanks to the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives of it all, and also just like everybody's algorithms changing, I think this will be a corner of it that some people are new to. So I can't wait to chat about it with them.
All right. Talk to us about behind the scene podcasts.
Oh, so I was like, oh, right, because I have this wild acronym for it. So it's BTS-TBTS, behind the scenes, too blessed to stress. And it's a 6-part mini series that I decided to put together, really exploring the question that I brought up earlier, which is like, how did I come to the subject material? Again, I've spent a lot of time thinking about like how I want to talk about these questions when I'm at events and on podcasts because there are going to be people in every audience who have their own personal experiences with religion and they might still be involved and plugged into religious communities. And so, even though I spent a lot of time researching for this book, I still want to own the fact that I come to it largely as an outsider. And so, BTS TBTS is really an exploration of how I got to this fascination. It unpacks kind of my like really young life, observing people missing school for their first Holy Communions, attending over the top bar mitzvah parties, always kind of being on the side of it as somebody who is from a mixed faith family and whose parents were divorced. And so I was never really involved in either of those religious traditions. It talks about the friends that I mentioned earlier who I kind of didn't realize were extremely involved in their church, but who I fell in love with because they were so kind. It talks about the rabbit hole I fell into over COVID. It talks about some of the hard decisions that I had to make in editing the book based on these contexts that I learned about over time. And it's been a lot of fun. Each episode is 20 minutes or less. So it's like kind of easy, light narrative listening. New episodes out every Tuesday. And I think it will be hopefully a great supplement for people reading the book, especially if you can't come see me on tour and talk more about this in person. And if you also just like behind the scenes writing stuff, there's a whole episode about what I had to cut really and why I made those decisions and why those decisions were especially hard to make based on what I learned while researching and based on kind of what I figured out about myself. So it was really fun to put together. I learned a lot about myself, which is a pleasant surprise.
I love this. So, listeners, you can also listen to BTS TBTS.
So many
So many
letters.
letters. So, let's talk about your book recommendations because you have a mix
Yes.
of really good book recommendations. Some of them I'm familiar, some of them I'm like, oh, I need to read this just based on
Yes.
your pick.
Okay, so my first recommendation is Little One by Olivia Mentor. As we're talking, it's been for less than a week. I was lucky enough to be with Olivia for her launch event here in Philly a couple of days ago. Olivia is well known on Substack and as a co host of the Bad on Paper podcast. Her first book, Such a Bad Influence, came out a few years ago. And I am lucky to be her friend. And we've really kind of gotten to know each other well over the last year or so. And Little One is number one, it's beautifully written. Every single word of Little One is stunning, and Olivia has really labored over every sentence to make sure that it is precise and evocative. So if you just want to read anything that is stunning, like on a line level, Little One is for you, but it also is a cult story. And so if you like cult stories, you'll like this too. It is a dual timeline novel about a woman named Catherine. In the past timeline, she is growing up in Central Florida as part of a wellness cult, which is run by her father. And as you might imagine, with a wellness cult, there are a lot of unhealthy habits that are building for her. In her present day time, she is living in New York, having tried to outrun all of those hard parts of her past. And then a journalist comes to interview her because he is trying to write a story about this cult. And so she kind of has to figure out how to re engage with her past. And it's just great. It's a wonderful read. I think it has some parallels with Too Blessed to Stress just because of these like kind of extremist ideas. And I am so fascinated by the big concepts that are showing up in conversations online and like in big groups. And my book talks about like faith and how faith overlaps with things like fashion, according to these groups. But Olivia's book explores wellness culture and how that can be so harmful.
Yeah, I read a little one, and for me, it was like interesting because I have my own triggers with position of
Me
power
too.
and
Yeah.
food and the specifics. That's where the recovery comes from. Because God bless
Yeah.
lots, we're a great place to have an eating disorder. And so, so it was an interesting dynamic to see how we had to purify because it was the same idea, purification
Yep.
of food through exercise, through no AC, like just the idea. And it's all these concepts, all these high level concepts. And then at the end of the day, it's control. It's how do we control the narrative? How do we control the action? And seeing Catherine looking for freedom by learning how to drive.
Yes. Yeah. Just being able to leave.
Jill-
Imagine being able to
Yeah.
leave. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was like a really interesting dynamic because I wouldn't think of it set in Central Florida. Because I was like,
Yeah.
we're not excited. I was like, oh, maybe California. But I'm like, no, Central
Yeah.
Florida is such a, now that I live in Florida and I live in around Central
Hmm.
Florida, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see this happening here. This idea of the emergence of like purification and control
Hmm.
and power and seeing this larger than life men trying to reach enlightenment in his own way. It
Yeah.
created this community.
Yeah. I'm currently reading Paper Cut by Rachel Taff. I don't know if that
I
book is on your radar.
just got the audiobook. I know.
Yes. And Rachel is another friend of mine. We're in like a 2026 debut group
Yeah.
together. And I'm so excited for her. Her book has been everywhere. But there's some similar themes in Paper Cut. It's about this like larger than life father figure. As far as I know, it is not. I haven't seen yet that there's as much of an emphasis on like food and power, but there is some similar like exploration of these dynamics. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, I would also recommend Paper Cut, also beautifully written. But I would echo Laura that it is that Little One in particular is a tough read, especially if you grew up in the aughts, especially if you have personal triggers with respect to food and body image. I share in that experience. So if you are somebody who likes to read trigger warnings, I would read those and
Yeah.
take care of yourself before you read it. But it's worth a read if you feel up for it.
It makes great conversation with your therapist.
That's true.
It's homework. You can just bring it up to your therapist and dissect it and have a conversation around it. And it's just,
Yeah.
it is okay. It doesn't make you good or bad. It's just is. We got to practice radical
Yep.
acceptance at this point.
Yes. I love that idea. Maybe I'll bring it up with my therapist.
Yes. All right. So let's talk about the other recommendations. I feel like you have one about reality TV Angelinos. It's the last one. I cannot say the name of the book. That
Yes.
one I'm actually curious about.
Yes. So the book is called Tarantulas, and it is by Porachista Kakapor. And it is about, it's for, I will say upfront, it's a satire, and it is a way over the top satire. We read this in my book club, and it was actually very polarizing because satire, I think, is by nature very polarizing. Some people love it, some people hate it. This is another one. You have to read the trigger warnings if you are triggered by conversations about food, eating disorders. For me, it was okay because it was so clear to me that this was a satire, that it was over the top. But it's also sensitive. I get it. So if you are triggered, please make sure you read the warnings. But it is about a family that is from Iran. and they are living in LA. Their father has earned a lot of money by becoming an entrepreneur. I believe he runs like a fast casual pizza restaurant, which in itself is kind of funny because he's not Italian and they like don't eat pizza at home. And it is about the four sisters primarily. So there's some like light Little Women parallels. Little Women is my favorite classic. I actually read Tarantula shortly after I read Blue Sisters. And so I was in this kind of like Little Women retelling moment, which was fun. And it's set in the middle, well, I guess sort of at the very beginning of the pandemic, because it kind of follows what happens when one of the sisters becomes hell bent on getting the family a reality TV show that is very clearly like a Kardashians esque premise. It's about like they're just like over the top wealth and these amazing parties they have. But peak COVID is like not a great time to show that you're hosting huge parties without masks. And so it's kind of about like just the hysteria that happens in the family when they are not agreeing about how to pursue this opportunity. One of the sisters gets totally radicalized by the right and sort of goes into a bad direction. I just thought that it was really, I just love like a very voicey book. It felt super different and fresh. It is absurd and it's meant to be. And I just thought that it was a really interesting take on a lot of family stories that I tend to gravitate toward. And it was just like zany and off the wall. So if you're ready for that, I think you would really like this book.
I think this book sounds perfect for the Valley persons. The new Valley
Yes.
show, like the shots of
Yep.
sunsets, the Iranian,
Yes.
LA, larger than life family.
Yes. Yep.
So I think, and honestly, the Valley person, it's pretty good. It's better than the Valley than with Jack Saylor. This one's actually a fabulous.
Anything's better than Jax Taylor, let's be real. But yes, it is. It kind of is funny that those things, because this book came out, I believe, last February.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it inspired this take on the Valley. But I had a lot of fun with this book. And I know a lot of people in my book club didn't agree, but maybe that's what makes it a good book club book. So another book I wanted to talk about is Glossy by Marissa Meltzer. And I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I kind of have a very particular taste for nonfiction. I like when it's written by a journalist. I like when it's like a super deep dive on a narrow subject. And this is a book about the CEO of Glossier, the beauty brand, which I know of because I was in my 20s in New York when it was like on the rise and I had friends that were highly devoted to Glossier. I have never purchased a Glossier product, but the book is pitched and I think is this like very interesting portrait of a millennial CEO.
Mhm.
And we don't get a lot of those for women. Like we're starting to get these in-depth profiles of men who are CEOs who are millennials, but this is really like the first of its kind. It was written with Emily's permission, so she was interviewed for it, but she was a little bit nervous and the author talks about that, how like in their early conversations she wasn't quite sure if she wanted to participate. So I think it's a very fair portrait of her rise. And I don't know that I would call it a fall, but Glossier has definitely had its ups and downs. And it had a meteoric rise, but I would say it's leveled out a little bit over the last couple of years. And I just loved reading it. It was a really great kind of just detailed account of ambition. And that was something I was really interested in my book is like just ambitious women and how that can look different in different contexts and in different communities. But like ambition is and should be allowed in all of these places. That was a way that I connected with one of my main characters in particular, where I was like, I don't get this person at all, but she is ambitious as hell, and she like really she wants to achieve what she wants to achieve, and I get that about her. And so I liked that about Glossy. It also was the reason that I liked another book that I had recommended on my list, which is Workhorse by Caroline Palmer. Huge book. It's 500 plus pages. Built as kind of like a new take on The Devil Wears Prada. For me, it was more grounded than The Devil Wears Prada. It doesn't have that like larger than life Miranda Priestley vibe. It's much more like this is maybe what it was actually like to work at a magazine post 9/11. But it's about this like extremely ambitious young assistant named Chloe and how she, again, this is all about power, like how she chases down power, how she works within the power dynamics that are given to her. She's an extremely unlikable protagonist, but it is done in like the best way that I've ever seen. So much so that I found myself at multiple points being like, wait, she's a terrible person. But I forgot because the book was written in such a way that I was so rooting for her. And I kept having to step back and be like, she's amoral. This is so bad. And I also, every once in a while, you just want to dig into a 500 plus page book. So I would recommend Workhorse as well.
So I have to tell you, I read Glossy a couple years ago, and the reason I was not familiar with Glossier, for some reason, I think it escaped me in my
Okay.
millennial girl boss era of the 2010s. I was involved in
Yes.
the wellness part. I was in the wellness, the
Okay.
girlies who were in wellness mafia, who then became manifestation girlies and grifty
Yep.
grifty. And
Beach
so
body. Yeah.
Beachbody, Tune It Up, like all the
Oh,
things.
I was into Tone It Up.
Yes. But I remember Emily from the hills because she's the
I
intern. Like you
Which I didn't
said,
know, Laura, until I read the book. And I was like, oh my God, it's the super intern. And then I, of course, went down the YouTube rabbit hole and I was like, okay, I have to look at all these clips from the hills of her. And then I had to go down the
yes,
other rabbit hole of her talking about Glossier. And I, again, talk about ambition. Like, you start on the hills, you have this really weird guest spot on the hills that could totally have made everybody hate you. And
yeah.
some would argue that it did, and maybe that carried into Glossier. But she figured it out. And yes, she had a lot
Yeah.
of privilege, of course. But that blew my mind. I had no idea going into reading the book.
She is the super intern. She's the one that
Yep.
more gets compared to. Whitney gets compared because they're lazy. They're from LA. She's New Yorker. She's a go-getter. She's a
Yeah.
hustler. And then seeing her rise with the blog
Yep.
and like having conversations and the idea of like that's how a lot of the girl bosses in the 2010s were just up and
Yeah.
coming. These are early OG influencers. Like these are where the
Yep.
influencers started. It didn't start with Instagram and the algorithm. It started before that. It
Nope.
started with blogs. It started from having that as a calling card and just talking about a streetwear and makeup and
Yes.
what's in your bag.
So good.
So yes, but if you want to read another good nonfiction, Kingdom
Yeah.
of Prep, it's the Rise and Fall of J. Crew. That actually talks
Oh,
about clients, but it talks about
okay.
before that, how it got started as a mail order. It's delightful.
Okay.
Really great thing. And then I was like, I went back and I was like, wait, I had a piece of J. Crew that still stands to this day. My only coat that left over that made it through all the moves is from
In Tampa.
in Tampa.
Oh.
It's actually from J. Crew catalog before the Den Alliance years.
Okay.
Madewell and how they this brand has evolved over time. And that's a pretty good one to see the Rise and Fall of J. Crew. That actually has a little bit of fall. Unlike Glossy. The Glossy
Yeah.
was kind of like if it's ambivalent. It wasn't so like salacious about it.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. I'm going to go put that on hold at the library right now. That sounds right up my alley right now.
So,
Yeah.
all right, Alli, tell us where you can find you online.
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram primarily, Alli Hoff Kosik, ALLIHOFFKOSIK. I'm at the same place on TikTok, although I am not TikTok quite as much. I'm trying to be too millennial cringy on TikTok. You can find me on Substack under my name. Find me on my website, allihoffkosik.com. I always have different things going on. So Instagram and the website are probably the places to find all of it. And obviously, it would mean so much to me if you either ordered my book from all of the places where you buy books, especially independent bookstores, request it from your library, tell your friends, and then come on over and send me a DM and we can talk about it.
Yeah, and the audio was narrated by 4 different narrators. So each character
Yes.
has its own narrator. So if you're an audiobook listener, as many
Yes.
podcasts are, get the audiobook. Get it from Libra FM.
Yes, get it from Libra FM. I actually just got my author copy of the audiobook last week and I started listening to it. And I didn't know when we were casting it that if I was going to get 1 narrator or 4. And I was so pleasantly surprised that they were casting 4. And I love all 4 narrators who are involved. And I hope you like listening to it. I am primarily an on paper reader, but I know how much of a difference like that well-produced audio can make to a reading experience. So happy listening to that.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Alli, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the What to Read Next. For more book lists, cozy reads, and library tips, visit the whattoreadnextblog.com. Your next great read might be waiting there.